Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WREVA Electrifying News. Here we are, September edition 2023. With me, as always, we have Mr. Ian Graham joining us from downtown Kitchener. How are you today, sir?
Not doing too bad. We're getting that change in weather, and you can feel the nights are cooler, the days are shorter, and fall's coming. All the leaves are changing, and but that means for some nice road trips to go check out the leaves changing color.
That's right. That's right. Yes, indeed. Also joining us, Mr. Eric Stevens from Listowel. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark. Just came out of a great trip from Algonquin where the leaves were just starting to turn up there too. So it was a beautiful trip and great enjoying the transition to fall. So
very good. Very good. And just thought I'd do a plug for WREVA's upcoming event we're going to have on September the 30th, Saturday. It's our big National Drive Electric Week event being held in Waterloo. Please, if you haven't already and want to attend, go to our website and register to attend. It's going to be between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Up on the boardwalk in Waterloo. And you can register at the website www.tinyurl.com/NDEW2023. So you can register at that website, and we'd love to see you on that Saturday. With that said, Ian's going to get the deck rolling for Electrifying News this September.
All right. We got to change the color of the leaves on this card. I just realizing, that would look better.
Well, you must have lots of time, so you can just individually color those leaves one at a time and get them all changed.
Exactly.
Then what would we do for the winter time?
That's right. It would be branches.
Palm trees. We're going to drive south. Palm trees. All right. Our first slide is Ford's investing in Quebec, building a cathode plant to solidify the EV supply chain in North America. And this is very great news to see. Canada once again is coming through with the supply chain aspect and the huge opportunity that it has for this.
Yeah, so this is another huge investment also into Bécancour, Quebec, which seems to be a hot spot for cathode active material. Ford's got that big blue oval plant going in right now that's going to be supposed to be producing a huge amount of batteries. And of course, that's going to require a lot of material raw material in order to make those batteries. So Quebec is becoming quite the hot spot for manufacturing cathode active material. This is after, General Motors also formed a joint venture up in the same area to produce a whole bunch of cathode active material. So it makes sense that Ford is also getting up there to manufacture in the same spot too. So this is becoming a sort of a hub and a hot spot for battery materials in this area.
Yeah, and it just makes sense that at this point, there is a raw materials grab out there for all battery manufacturers. Of course, trying to deal with the IRA rules in the United States. Canada, of course, being part of that deal, allowing manufacturers to set up shop in Canada or produce or even just supply their different battery endeavors, and that's another indication of it here. We've seen this setup of many different companies and operations over the past 12 months now, and this is just more of it still happening.
Mm-hmm. When I hear the term cathode active material, I'm just trying to think of some sort of like EV superhero that becomes like all charged up, like they could, help to advertise all this stuff. Every time I hear that term, But as we know that Canada has more and more opportunity is coming up for the actual raw materials for North America and perhaps even beyond on that. We're starting, it's getting to be some great opportunities for jobs, for the financial aspect of Canada. And the more that we have with these type of things, the more you could say validation that Canada has in doing the electric vehicle aspect of things and not relying on so many other countries, such as, say, China. So I'm going to speak to that actually at the end of our podcast in regards to the last slide. Just a little bit of an interesting chat with a person there in regards to the stuff that we can supply as Canada. All right. Now, this was interesting when Mark, when you sent this to us, I was quite surprised to really honest, that it's not something that I would have expected to see. That under 30% is not a great number of charging stations that are operational, and especially in Guelph. Guelph's kind of got this reputation of being a very green. They have the first green MP, Mike Schreiner, elected there and everything. So I was quite surprised when I was reading on this.
Yeah, it's kind of not a great news story, but it is something we need to be aware of. There was a rush, maybe about 5 years ago, a rush to get companies to set up different EV chargings, whether they're level 2s or DC fast. And in the rush to get shovels in the ground and get some of these units up and running, there was no real forethought as to what type of maintenance are these sites going to require going forward. What is the uptime that these units will have over their lifetime, and what is their lifetime? A lot of these questions were never asked when there was some federal funding available for groups to get involved with this. And again, everybody was anxious to get shovels in the ground and start to get these units up and running. There's almost a bit of a gold rush for groups to get funding from the federal government. And unfortunately, here we are, 6-7 years down the road when some of these units were installed, and a number of them have become dysfunctional to the tune of, we've got only 3 out of 10 units up and running in the city of Guelph. As mentioned in the article, there's about 184 EV charging stations around Guelph that was funded by the federal government's zero emission vehicle program, the ZVIP. Just 55 of those 184 were up and running by the end of February 2023. And this is kind of a warning to us going forward. Obviously, you can't do anything about what has happened here at this point, except maybe some forward-thinking people will write rules differently when we go to tender again, or if it does happen again, that there'll be the forethought of, okay, it's not just getting them up and running, it's also maintaining them, and it's also tracking their uptime. Because as we've mentioned previously, there's nothing more frustrating than being on a road trip, planning your stop, and then getting to a location that has an inoperative or broken charger. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You don't want to happen, but this is showing that there's a lot of these type scenarios around the city of Guelph, and I would also say other municipalities as well. It's not just Guelph's problem. This is a problem that everybody faces, and it's something that we should be aware of going forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, looking in the article, it talks about how many of these sites do take between 18 to 24 months just for permitting and construction and commissioning. Once an agreement has been negotiated and signed, so we're talking 2 years just to get some of these into the ground today. And, some of that could be even part of early on when some of these were going for when they're grabbing funding and stuff like that. They might not have looked at all of the considerations that were needed for some of these sites. Some of these sites require a huge amount of power. And so some of these little divisions, areas of the city might not actually have the grid capacity to support the on-demand power for these as well, too. And they might not have thought fully fledged that out when they grabbed that funding as well. And so there might be some other major upgrades that are required, or there are other considerations that all of a sudden that charger just can't go into the ground there. So,
yeah. My concern when I was reading this article is the perception that it just gives to people who are considering to switch to an electric vehicle. When you have a news article like this, is like, oh, so when I travel to other jurisdictions, is this going to be 3 out of 10 chargers that potentially I could use? And at that point as well, what does that mean for where I am within the next jurisdiction? How far do I have to then drive to get to those 3 out of 10? And it just doesn't bode well when we see something like this. Something else that was in the article was, the comment came up about, we charge at home the majority of the time, but you can't really, that's not really part of the reason for these being down, and you can't use that as an excuse because, great, are you now going to look in Guelph and see whose home has a charger and then knock on the door and ask them that they can use it? So I think the 18 to 24 months for permitting, construction and commissioning, man, that's a long time. And I kind of wish that, like Eric, like you mentioned, certain areas, are they able to do this properly? And are they now running into some issues in that respect? So it's a good learn, right? It definitely is good that we can learn from this. But again, I don't like the perception that this is giving to our potential EV community.
Another thing to keep in mind is that as this federal program was being run, again, starting about 8 years ago, the format of EVs was different. The amount of batteries, size of batteries, the range of these cars were vastly different than what they are today. We have a lot more longer range in vehicles today. Less charging has to be done. But again, this is some of our tax money being used to set up these chargers. And of course, we don't want to see our tax money wasted. We'd much rather them be functioning and used for the right purpose. But again, it's something that we have to learn from, and going forward, we have to correct how we would offer this program again.
Yeah, definitely some learning and some lessons to be learned here. And then how do we move forward basically with a plan that works for everybody going forward?
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of charging, I love this red color. Oh, I wasn't too sure at first when it first came out. Now I see it on the charger and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. The ultra red. Anyways, Tesla did have their 50,000th supercharger put in. And they had a kind of like, where is this, somewhere in the world, and basically where it was in the world. And I'm sure we can give this away now, but it was Roseville, California on 1851 Freedom Way. It has a plaque at the bottom, distinctly identifies it as the 50,000th supercharger turned on by Tesla. And of course, they've been investing in their supercharger network since 2012. And now, big news in the last few podcasts that we've been talking about of some major manufacturers of auto like GM and Ford, et cetera, that are now going to be having access next year in 2025 to the supercharger network, which basically I look at as awesome. It's just meaning that the supercharger network is just constantly growing. And if you look, outside of Toronto, there's a couple more of these networks out in Mississauga that have come online. Recently, I think over the last year, Honey Harbor, those type of things. So it's good to see.
Yeah, it is. And actually, some of the superchargers that people are going to have access to in other vehicles have already started their march towards the west. It's going to be between Ottawa and Calgary. to start with, and 2 locations just to the west of Ottawa already have the magic dock on the superchargers that will allow anybody with an electric vehicle that has a CCS connection to charge. So they're starting to roll those out in Ontario as well.
Mm-hmm. I think Devin from the Greater Sudbury EV Association has gone to North Bay and tested it and said it works. Yeah.
Yeah, Deep River and North Bay were the 2 locations.
Yeah. I think it's good that Tesla's opening up their network. And now that the things are starting to harmonize towards the NACS or which would be now the SAE J3400 standard, basically.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. But now they're creating a universal standard for this that's independent of any one manufacturer as well too, which is good. And that way, everybody will be able to use one standard basically going forward. So that, not just Tesla, not just their supercharger network, but even the other networks that exist out there today too will be able to harmonize on this, and all cars will be able to use, all networks in a sense. So that'll be good going forward.
One other thing I will say for Tesla's 50,000th charger is that they should have done a better contest than just putting out a ultra red charger in the middle of a bunch of white chargers. Like, how obvious is it that that's the number 50,000? Like, they should have at least coated it in white like the regular ones and just have a little minor variation so that people could look for it for weeks before they found it. And then they could rip off the white, and underneath it is the ultra red. That's the way they should do it for the next one.
Yeah. As soon as the contest was announced, there's probably 1,000 people like, oh, I've already seen that go in.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to see that pickup line used. Yeah, baby, I'm SEJ 3000 compatible standard. For the true EV nerd, so bad. But yeah, again, love that red. I wasn't too sure when I first came out with it, but no, it's pretty cool. So, all right, moving on. This is really happy to see this, and this is actually just down the road from us in many respects. Conestoga College, Fancher College, and it's definitely something. I actually did look into it. If I could actually be part of this, but I need to have my driver's or my mechanic's license to do this. Yeah.
So this is a wonderful. I came across this program, and it's a wonderful program where if you're a mechanic today, certified mechanic today, and you want to upgrade your skills to learn more about electric vehicles, this is a free program that's being offered today where you can sign up for this course. And they teach you the fundamentals for basically how to handle electric vehicles and how to maintain and work on electric vehicles in a proper and safe manner as well too. So I thought this was a fantastic program because today a lot of times there's a lot of questions about as EVs age and stuff like that. There's a lot of people who don't like taking their car back to a dealership or to a manufacturer service center or something like that. And there's a lot of third-party mechanics that are out there today. And so this could be a program that could really help a lot of those third-party sites out there today, mechanics, to keep servicing these vehicles going into the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always good to have, especially mechanics that are used to ICE vehicles, just a basic course to give them the 1, 2, 3s of EVs. Would be highly helpful for anybody in that industry that is not up to speed with EVs yet. Just getting that introduction may lead, of course, to more training that they would want to do themselves. Also, it's something to let other mechanics know that the world of EVs is starting to really snowball along. You're going to be able to see more and more of these vehicles on the road. Canada hit just over 10% recently in a quarter. So these cars are going to need to be serviced, not as often as ICE vehicles, but service will have to be done. And having the mechanics out there that currently work on vehicles just introduced to them is a great idea.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how many of these mechanics are going to look at this and what do you mean there's only 18 or 20 moving parts? And, you know, I've been doing transmissions and all these pistons and everything else. And it's going to be, you know, for them, I'm thinking that they also will look at it as, wow, this is a heck of a lot easier and a lot cleaner for that matter as well, on this. But I find it interesting too, the advanced driver assistance system. That one I think is, especially for mechanics, is going to be interesting because that's a constantly growing aspect of things, with the driver assistance and the technology that's being implemented. That's going to be a constant. I can see them having to upgrade on all the time. So again, I kind of was disappointed. I was looking like, oh, I wouldn't mind actually taking that just to kind of have a better understanding of everything myself. So, you know, when I do that conversion of a Ferrari to EV or something, I would know what I'm doing and not get electrocuted.
Yeah, I don't think that's this kind of course. I think there might be a little bit more involved.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, Mark, as you mentioned, we have a big increase in Canada, you know, with the amount of EVs now being on the road. And, you know, we've got the first half of 2023.
Exactly. As mentioned, we hit a 10.5% market share in Canada for Q2 of 2023. And this little article just outlines some of the top, the best-selling EVs and plug-in hybrids for the first half of the year. And Canada has a federal EV credit, and some provinces have a provincial credit. Unfortunately, us in Ontario, we only have access to the federal credit at this time. And Canada as a whole, the federal government has put out $230.7 million in rebates over the first half of 2023 through the ZEV program, which stands for, of course, Zero Emission Vehicle Program. And 93% increase, of course, compared to last year, year over year. And that's great news. We saw this 10% mark Canada hit as a whole. That's fantastic. Ontario is lagging a little bit behind. We've got BC and Quebec that are out front, that are leading Canada. And of course, there's no surprise that both Quebec and BC have a provincial rebate as well. So might be a lot of the reason, because they're getting, you know, quite a bit more back for those purchases, because the province is kicking in somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 as well. So that's a plus for them. But again, as a whole, the country seems to be moving in the right direction. More and more of these vehicles are being sold. We're hitting all-time highs in sales. So it just looks like we're rolling along nicely. And of course, some of the top selling vehicles are just pictured on the screen. Model 3, I believe, is number 1. We've got the Ioniq 5. We've got
Kona, I think.
The Kona, correct.
Yeah, I4, yeah.
Yeah.
So great to see. Hopefully we can keep the momentum up, and we can go above 10.5 in the next quarter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've noticed too now, you know, I've been slowly starting to see how the conversation is starting to change a little bit too, with people, you know, especially as we interact with the public and stuff like that. I'm seeing the conversation change around electric vehicles. The questions are becoming less general and a little more pointed now, and people are a lot more serious about possibly looking at owning an EV for their next vehicle. So I'm seeing a lot more direct questions. Before when we first started, we saw a lot of very general questions, and we still see some of those today, but now we're starting to see a lot more pointed questions, or in some cases, even a lot of new EV owners who have a lot of questions as well too, that are coming to our group. So I've been noticing that more and more now, that there's a bit more awareness around it, and a lot more people that are now, the questions are more, I'm seriously considering this. And I've also, even when I'm talking to people and I come across somebody, and you know, the conversation comes up about electric vehicles, they're like, oh, you know, my cousin has one, or my brother has one, or my friend has one. So now because, you know, we're seeing this higher share of vehicles being sold, almost everybody now, or at least most people now, know somebody who owns an electric vehicle. And when that happens now, that just, the awareness just starts to grow. It starts to snowball from there. So I think we're at an inflection point right now, and it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I will say though, I do still hear kind of some of the baloney myths still come out. Unfortunately, it's what it is. But Eric, you're totally right. I think more people that I talk to, especially if they see that I drive an electric vehicle and they're like, oh, we're actually looking at considering this, and our neighbor or our friends have mentioned to us about these things, and way more interest and way more knowledge, proper knowledge, I would say. They're getting a better understanding of everything. And even as we mentioned too, with back to the Guelph article, the fact that more long-range vehicles are out, more people are now considering it, because it's not a 200-kilometer vehicle, it's a 400-kilometer vehicle. The big thing I would really like to point out is the 93% increase from 1 year ago. So I bring this up with people and even my students when we're talking about technology, is what's called the S curve. And I mean, 93% increase. Wow, that's an S curve. If those of you don't understand, basically is the adoption rate of a new technology. So if you went from a black and white television to a color television, but then now you get to HD, you can see the curve really goes up. Same with our cell phones and everything in that respect. But a 93% increase, man, that adoption curve has got to be going right on up. That's for sure.
Yeah. And a lot of that is driven not so much by demand, but sometimes just by availability. So
yeah.
As more people get to test drive and get in some of these vehicles, they're going to like them more and get into them. And yeah.
Exactly. Now that's a good question too, is like, we still hear of, the wait time is 6 months to a year to even 2 years. So what would these numbers be if that wait time was not 6 months even? Let's say it was 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
I think those numbers are going to change even that much more.
Yeah. Or if people could just go to a dealership and actually sit in one and test drive it.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, which still is not the case today, right? Like we're still in a situation where you need to order it, and you typically need to wait, unless, of course, someone ordered one in before you and didn't take it home, and you get the chance to grab it. But you're right. It's not a typical car buying experience still at this point in 2023.
Yeah. I did see an Ioniq 6 on my way to a show in Etobicoke, and that was, for me, it was kind of like, oh, there is one. It's not a common thing, even though it's been announced in that. And a couple of weeks before that, I actually saw a Lucid Air, which, anyone knows that company, you're talking like almost a $200,000 car, and of course, full of traffic. I'm like, oh God. I I don't know if I want to be driving almost $200,000.
By the way, I saw Lucid Air in Huntsville on Wednesday. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So nice. All right. Moving along. This article came up just recently, and Kia to build its future electric vehicles with recycled ocean plastic. And this is if those of you don't understand the recycled ocean plastic aspect, we have what is called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and it's the world's largest accumulation of floating waste. And I've been seeing articles about this and even video documentaries, etc. It's got to be going on like 10 to 15 years plus. I might even say it's even more than that. But basically, Kia has worked with Pacific Ocean, and they have hauled in 55 tons of this waste. And the waste, again, that's in this garbage patch is everything from your, water bottles to toothbrush to plastic chairs. Like when you watch some of the videos and what they pull up, it's incredible. And a lot of it could be, not that people are throwing this in, but just with nature and the wind and everything, just blowing it in, and then the currents taking it to this specific area, and it's just like a kind of a cyclone of garbage. And one of the problems as well with this is that the plastic gets broken down, but it becomes microplastic, which then the fish eat, which then, of course, part of our food chain, it affects everything. So This is I think this is a really cool initiative that Kia is doing on this.
I have to say that this large drop zone of garbage that's floating in the Pacific Ocean, it is starting to wane. I've seen many documentaries that you've mentioned, Ian, about how it gets in there from rivers and lakes, and the blowing, as you mentioned, and so forth, and of course at sea some ships dropping things over the side, but it's mostly comes from rivers that empty into the sea. And they're bringing this garbage out into it. It floats to a certain area in the ocean, and as you mentioned, just kind of spirals around in a dead zone that sits out there. But there are a few different companies that have been working, nonprofits and profit companies that have been working to clear this up. And I think that Kia is going to run out of ocean garbage to take in, which is a great thing. I hope they run out once this broadcast goes out. But it's something that obviously they could switch to other plastics as well, and that won't be a problem for them there. But this is great advertising for Kia. I just think that we're starting to get a handle on this garbage in the ocean, and I think it's going to be cleaned up sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this really is sort of a somewhat success story, basically, where a lot of stuff has gone a long ways to try to prevent some of this waste from getting into the ocean. Even here in some jurisdictions in Europe and North America, we're starting to move away from single-use plastics. Then, of course, they're getting better at filtering and catching the stuff in the rivers where you're getting a lot of contamination. And now, of course, there's a lot of companies that are going out there and tackling and going after the patches that are out there as well, too. So a lot of recycled plastics that's being captured, and this is on pace to being a success story, I think, of capturing a lot of these plastics in the environment. There's still some ways to go to make sure that this stuff doesn't get out there. There's also other concerns with what they're called forever chemicals as well, too, which are like the PFAS type polymers. These are fluoropolymers used in things like Teflon and stuff like that. They can create a lot of waste out there too. And there's a lot of legislation coming down the road for those types of plastics as well too. BMW is also a company that's been big on using recycled plastics and plastics from the ocean as well. So this is a good success story, basically. And
yeah.
And just a reminder for everyone, if you want to read more about the articles we're speaking about in today's presentation, they'll be listed in the show notes, and you can click on them and read them as you like.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you give us a thumbs up at this point, since you're still listening? in the video, that'd be great. Thank you.
I wonder how many horror movie doll heads are in the floating, those weird looking dolls.
So what you're saying, Ian, is you buy a Kia, maybe you get like a little doll eye somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And it because there's that movement, makes it really spooky. Okay.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
All right. This is really cool. Now, I got to be honest. I'm always curious with the hydrogen aspect of where we're going with it, because hydrogen, of course, can be produced. There's blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, brown hydrogen, produced more so by methane and natural gas. But I find this with the plane. I watched actually a recent Fully Charged episode that talked with the company that's working on this plane. And what was interesting was that the propeller on the one side was 4 propellers, but it was the normal jet fuel or gas fuel on the one side, but then the other side was the electric/hydrogen, and it had 5 propellers. And it was kind of a comparison with the 2 of them for the research that they were doing.
Yes, yeah. On that particular one, they had to do it that way because when they're doing a test airplane for flying, they have to have one conventional certified engine and then one is experimental, basically, while they're doing their testing. But yeah, this is an interesting concept here. So this is ZeroAvia, and basically they're looking at making in a sense, it's a hybrid aircraft. It's an electric airplane, basically, but basically they're using hydrogen fuel cells to generate power in their aircraft. And I think this is a potential great use for a hydrogen fuel cell type thing, situation. If you want to do longer range type flying and stuff like that, there's newer engines coming on the market, and especially something like this. This is a Dash 8 Q400. This is a 90-seater airplane. This is a decent sized commuter airplane for decent sized commuter flights. And this is this is starting to scale up now from your smaller Twin Otter type aircraft or your Beaver type aircraft. This is now getting into actual good sized commercial aviation. And I know in the aviation world, they're starting to work into what's called open rotor engine designs as well too. Is a new technology that they're working on right now, and a fuel cell type application could work well with an open rotor type design as well too for engines for larger commercial airplanes. So I see a lot of potential moving forward for this, for helping to green up and make much more efficient the aviation industry. So I see a growth curve here, and I see potential here, and that's what I like about this story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not surprising that we've seen the growth size of aircraft that started testing, and here we are up to a Dash 8 that again can seat almost 90 passengers. So that definitely gets into a sweet spot where it makes financial sense that the vehicle can haul 90 paying customers around, and of course makes it a lot more suitable for commercial applications. But it's amazing. It just seems like about 4 or 5 years ago, the first electric plane, a converted Beaver with a short flight with pontoons was spotted in Vancouver. Then out here at Waterloo Region Airport, there's a test aircraft for students. It's a 2-seater, all electric drive. And here we are just a few years later, and there's a Dash 8 that they're testing. So yeah, it's really moving. All things electrical seems to be where we're going.
Mm-hmm. No, I really kind of enjoyed listening to that documentary about this plane and the potential. And one thing that was kind of brought to my attention about the hydrogen aspect of things was that, hydrogen is so light, but the issue comes, like, it's lighter than if, say, you're trying to do the same thing with a battery in terms of range. But the problem comes about in the storage of hydrogen and how you actually put that in, where then the weight comes back into being a problem. But at the same time, with a plane, that will be an aspect that needs to be kind of looked at as well. And I love the fact, 300-mile range for 2025, 9 to 19 seater. I'll look into seeing if we can fly from Waterloo to my cabin, which is basically 300 miles away, and we'll get some props on it and put, and land on the water. Sure, it'll be great.
Yeah, I'll let you try that first. I'll sit at home and see how it goes.
Exactly. All right. Okay, so we got a couple interesting things to conclude with in terms of shows, and first one, of course, is Detroit, and I love to see on the web page this Powering Michigan EV experience and a new indoor EV experience. Now, Mark, Eric, you guys went to this show?
I was able to go this year. It was just this past Wednesday was Media Day. Mm-hmm. And at the show, I have to say that there wasn't a great amount of new vehicles on display. There was a lot that was available from last year that we saw announcements for, or demonstration vehicles, or mock-ups of vehicles. We've seen some manufacturing problems about getting vehicles into people's hands, and this year a lot of those vehicles were still here, obviously, but there wasn't a lot of new entries in the mix. Now, what I can say is that from walking through the show, I have to say that all manufacturers are now pushing EV. We've got, okay, not all, the vast majority. So we've got these large booths that these manufacturers are setting up, and they're no longer putting the EV in the back of the booth. They're now all up front and center, having their own advertising, their own spotlights, even some of their own dedicated spaces like Ford and GM, both having large EV sections where in the Ford's case, the F-150 had its own separate area with spotlights on it. The Mach-E was right beside it in a separate section for it alone. And then when you get over to GM, they had all their EVs together. So a group of, 4 of them, all front and center with EV marketing, pushing electric vehicles, the plugs front and center, so you could see what the charging cords look like, how they were to be used with the vehicles. It's a great thing to see, because it was maybe 6-7 years ago that Eric and I went to a show in Toronto, and they were hiding the EVs, most manufacturers. They were behind a billboard. They were in the back of the booth. It was depressing to see, but now it's completely turned around, and it looks like most of the manufacturers have gotten on board with the EV revolution, and they're pushing forward. And NAIAS in Detroit, which stands for North American International Auto Show, was more evidence that this is going on. Another neat thing is they had an indoor test track for EVs, and they had an acceleration line on it. And I thought, my gosh, how are they going to allow me to drive the car, a fast acceleration and a hard brake, and then I found out, oh, it's just a ride along. You don't get to drive. You have to sit in the passenger seat. So there was that. And actually, I do have a video I could possibly share here. We can see if we can screen share this.
Does that mean I stopped screen sharing? Oh, no.
I should just take over.
All
So
right.
just a few photos here. Of course, it's being held at the old Kobo Center, which they've changed the name to another sponsor. I forget the Huntington, I believe, or something along that line.
Huntington Place, yep.
Yeah. And this, of course, is GM headquarters, which is right beside the Huntington Place. And they had their EVs, their Hummer EVs out front and all shined up the morning of the show. So that was kind of cool to see. And we've got inside, we've got, of course, one that we're all waiting for is the Equinox, which was on display. And that is at the price they were offering initially, starting at 35,000 Canadian. A lot of people are waiting for this vehicle. Being produced in Mexico, and they're starting to get these rolled out. The Blazer, of course, has come out first, but we will see if it rolls out on time. And there's another interesting one from GM, which was the E-Ray. So we've got a Corvette with an electric assist. It's a front wheel drive electric motor that's added to it that increases, of course, off the line speed and overall horsepower, but it's just an assist motor. It doesn't really drive it for any real distance. You can put around in a parking lot under electric power, but other than that, the gas motor is on most of the time. But we understand that there is an all-electric version of the Corvette coming. It's just not this particular model, but it did look stunning in its debut at the show.
Very cool.
Yep.
And yeah, that was it was a fun walkthrough, and looking forward to what's going to happen next year. I think there's going to be more of a breakthrough as next year arrives. Yeah,
you can see that the tone has changed at a lot of manufacturers now that they're really trying to and you know, in some cases, some manufacturers, it might be more perception than it is other things, but they're really trying to put front and center their efforts and try to demonstrate to the public and even to their investors that they're taking vehicle electrification serious and that this change is coming, whether whether some manufacturers are ready for it or not. So
a lot of them went kicking and screaming into this, but many of those are starting to realize that this is going to be their future.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's coming along. I was wondering about the 300 feet of acceleration, and I thought, yeah, there's probably and it says sit alongside a professional driver. It's like, yeah.
That would have been a tough pill to swallow for the insurance company that would be looking after that.
Yeah, just a wee bit of liability there.
Yeah, I want to fly the hydrogen plane. Is that okay? Oh man, right on.
They might ask to see your pilot's license first there.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, well, and just ending off tonight, I actually, Mark, if you were going Wednesday to the auto show, I mean, you could have picked me up at 5:30 in the morning from the Waterloo Regional Airport at 5:30 a.m. from Vancouver. So I was a speaker at Fully Charged, and if you are not unsure of what Fully Charged is, it's a YouTube show. It's been around for 13 years. Hosted by Robert Llewellyn, and he's a bit of a celebrity. And quick funny story, the show started on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We arrived on the Thursday and got downtown Toronto to the waterfront where the convention was happening, and we're walking in Vancouver. Yep. And we're walking and kind of looking out at the mountains over the harbor and everything else, and then I kind of the corner of my eye just, there's a couple of guys walking towards me, but just they're going past. And anyone who knows who Robert Llewellyn is will know that he has a very distinctive voice. And I heard the voice and I turned around like, Robert? And he looked at me and I'm like, hi, big fan. And great guy. And his other host was with him as well. And we had a great conversation. And you know what? The show overall, of course, I posted here is another friend of ours is Ken Boker. I think I'm saying his name right, Boker. And he was on the same panel as me on the Friday, and we were talking with Robert Llewellyn and a few other panelists of the EV and energy myths. Yes, there is my stocking picture with Robert Llewellyn. He's honestly, what a great guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him, and he's another person I would say who's done so much for the EV community in doing the reviews of electric vehicles, going to where they're manufactured, and then of course going beyond that with how we power our homes and everything that you can think of in regards to electric vehicles and basically anything electrical. This channel has really done well with. But anyways, I did get an email recently, and it said that Vancouver, this was the first time that they were presenting, and they said they haven't completely tallied the numbers, but they said already that they're already looking at next year for doing a show. And it was very well attended from what they can tell. And they had like all of, the EV manufacturers, Volkswagen, Hyundai, Kia, Nissan. They had transport trucks there. They had a guy with another, like a Tesla boat that he had converted. And one of the coolest things was this 1913 or 1916, I'm trying to remember, Thompson electric car. And it was there was a gentleman from the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association who was chatting people and explaining so much about what's going on. And the one really interesting thing, because we hear this all the time, is, electric vehicle batteries only last like few years. This car, they have since upgraded the batteries, but even the old batteries and the chemistry that they've done with the new batteries and that should last them, they said, on average about 80 years that they were doing with this. So anyways, it was a lot of fun and a lot of great people that we met. for the show, and I'm looking forward to going to do it again. They're also doing Australia in February, and it's like, I like travel. Maybe we'll see. Netherlands in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm hoping they move the Canadian show a little bit closer to us, maybe Montreal or Toronto. That'd be nice to see.
It's funny because a bunch of us said that, hey, like, why aren't you doing Toronto? And we brought up the point that, Quebec in the States, how many people would come from there to Toronto to see the show on that. But the one thing too with Vancouver, oh my God, the amount of electric cars, especially Teslas, like it was like every third to fifth car was a Tesla. But they also have the incentives out there, and their charging network was just incredible as well. Every place we went to, there was something happening.
Yeah, BC Hydro has a nice network there, and of course the provincial incentive for EVs out there and stuff like that. And definitely EV adoption has really picked up in British Columbia, and areas like Vancouver and Victoria, of course, are very progressive. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, Ian. We like watching it from far, and was happy you'd taken those photos and sharing with us throughout the time you were there. It was great to see.
Yeah.
And we hope that maybe we'll get to see some of those talks maybe through the Fully Charged website, hopefully in the future.
Yeah. Speaking of talks, one thing I should bring up is I had dinner with Sandy Munro.
Ah, very nice.
He was like, there was a group of us, but he sat literally right across from me. And it was really interesting in chatting about, construction of electric vehicles in China versus North America. He had some real interesting insight onto that stuff. And man, what a very traveled person, been all over the world, and some really interesting takes on things in that respect. And, it was just fun. It was kind of like, between Robert Llewellyn and Sandy Munro, I was like, we're hanging out with some celebrity on the EV world. It was kind of cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, with that, I think we will wrap up this evening. We want to thank everyone for watching. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up. Press that subscribe button if you'd like to get notified next time we release a video immediately. And with that, some shout outs. Eric, any shout outs from you this evening?
No shout outs from me tonight, Mark.
You're just recovering from your trip. So
pretty much, yes.
And Ian, any shout outs from you?
I'm going to give a shout out to my friends Ernesto and Mauro, who originally are from Mexico, from Puebla, and they've been in Canada for probably 15 plus years, but they live out in Vancouver and in Abbotsford, and they took us on a few trips to some incredible Golden Ears Provincial Park, I think it was. It was basically like these beautiful mountains with a lake on top. And it was just kind of like, wow, like no wonder people go out to BC and not want to come back. It was amazing. And they were just amazing friends and hosts. So really good, big shout out to them for making the trip even that much more enjoyable.
Yeah, actually, I will give a shout out there, Mark. I'll give a shout out to Parks Ontario as well too. Algonquin Park. I was surprised even some of the remote sites that we canoed into. They were well maintained and in really good shape and stuff like that. So the crews out there must work really hard to keep those sites in the shape that they're at to get to those sites and do that. So I was really impressed by the work that they did.
Very good. Very good. Well, again, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch up with you next month. And if we don't see you on Saturday, September 30th at the Boardwalk in Waterloo. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.